If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you probably watched my other video where I talked about Busch Gardens Tampa Bay being the next Cedar Point. And in that video, I hinted at another park in the United States that I think is a tiny bit closer to being the next Cedar Point than Busch Gardens Tampa. There were a lot of good guesses, including Hershey Park, Six Flags Magic Mountain, Six Flags Great Adventure, and many more. And actually, a couple people got it right. The park I was thinking of is Busch Gardens Williamsburg. And that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about in today's video. In this video, I'm going to tell you all the reasons why I think it's possible that Busch Gardens Williamsburg is going to be the next Cedar Point. And I'm also going to be telling you why other parks are not. So stay tuned as we discuss the question of, is Busch Gardens Williamsburg the next Cedar Point? Now, I actually think this park has a huge chance at being the next Cedar Point, and I'm going to dive right in with the reasons why. But before I do that, just like I did with the Busch Gardens Tampa video, I'm going to start off by listing the similarities and differences between these two parks. But you'll notice there aren't as many similarities as Busch Gardens Tampa Bay. For starters, both of these parks have B&M dive coasters, B&M inverts, a hyper coaster, and a wooden coaster. So you can see that having similar coasters doesn't really play a factor. On the surface, Cedar Point and Busch Gardens Williamsburg seems like different parks. And that's absolutely correct. Just like Busch Gardens Tampa, Busch Gardens Williamsburg is at its core a theme park. Everything from the amazing shows to the amazing barbecue and awesome theming makes this a completely different park than any other amusement park. So in my opinion, this park's 100% a theme park. One of the reasons that I think the future is so bright for this park is because of its rapid growth and numerous circulating rumors for the future. From 2010 to 2020, BGW added 4 coasters: Revolton, Tempesto, Invader, and Pantheon. And they also added 3 flat rides. So they may not be growing at the fastest rate in the world, but they are super consistent. They basically add a coaster every 2 to 3 years and make sure they have a new ride at the park for every operating season. And I think that this consistency is what's going to make them the next Cedar Point. Let me explain. Having a new coaster or flat ride at the park each year is a really good concept, and I think BGW does it better than anybody. Six Flags is another company that makes sure you get a new ride each year, but their execution isn't nearly as good as Busch Gardens. With Six Flags, you get new cookie-cutter clones of other rides in the chain, or you get something that's really small and really cheap. That's why I can't remember the last time they added a B&M or Intamin. They're kind of really cheap, and it makes sense because they manage so many parks. But BGW takes this concept of adding a new ride, coaster, or water slide and does it really well. This gives people a new incentive to come back to the park each year, unlike other parks and other chains like Cedar Fair. So because of the super fast growth and SeaWorld's 2020 and 2021 spending spree, the future of this park is amazing. They just added Pantheon, a first of its kind inverting Intamin multi-launch shuttle coaster with the high-speed switch track and vertical spike. That was a mouthful. And believe it or not, there are already rumors for 2021. You probably already know this, but the rumored coaster for 2021 is a huge Intamin launched Giga shuttle coaster thingy that's over 300 feet tall. And there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to be a great ride, but it's kind of super expensive. So they're definitely spending a lot of money. So let's finally get back to my original question. Is Busch Gardens Williamsburg going to be the next Cedar Point? Well, if BGW keeps adding coasters at the same rate which they do now, by 2030, in my opinion, BGW should shape up to be a park with a coaster collection even better than Cedar Point's. And honestly, I think it will happen a little bit before then. Here's why. Remember how in the beginning of this video, we looked at what coasters BGW and Cedar Point have in common? And if you remember correctly, they had a few coasters in common, but it wasn't a lot. Well, this in my opinion is actually a really good thing. This means that BGW has a lot of room for different types of coasters that they could possibly get. They could get a B&M Flyer, a wing coaster, a spinning coaster, an indoor coaster, a Raptor, an RMC, and so many more. Cedar Point seems almost blocked from getting certain coaster types because they either already have them or they don't have the space. If they wanted to have a huge new coaster, they would have to be super creative and make it super compact, or they would have to remove an existing one. BGW doesn't have this problem. They have plenty of space where they could add major additions. Just look at how much space Pantheon and the 2021 additions are taking up. Cedar Point is going to have to be creative with their additions because as of now, they're pretty much landlocked. So once again, we're back to our original question of, is Busch Gardens Williamsburg going to be the next Cedar Point? And my answer to this question is no. In my opinion, Busch Gardens Williamsburg is completely different than any other park. It's a different park than Cedar Point. It caters to families and thrill seekers of all ages. And considering the fact that this is the only true major theme park anywhere in the East Coast, they're never going to stop catering to families. But with that being said, they still have to compete with other parks in the region like Kings Dominion and Carowinds. And as of now, they're dominating Kings Dominion. They're adding so many new coasters that their coaster collection is becoming one of the best in the United States. So no, Busch Gardens Williamsburg is not going to be the next Cedar Point. It's going to be something completely different. Busch Gardens is its own park. It's going to be the next thrill-seeking paradise like Cedar Point, but they will never lose focus on adding rides for the entire family. Busch Gardens is like a mix of Disney and Cedar Point. They have one of the greatest coaster collections in the United States, but they still focus on the little things that matter, like making guests happy by having amazing food, theming, and shows. So in 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if the question of which park is going to be the next Cedar Point is turned into which park will be the next Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see content just like this every week. I try to post videos weekly, and most of the time I post at least 2 videos a week. And comment below your thoughts on Busch Gardens Williamsburg possibly becoming the next Cedar Point. This is the Coaster Josh signing out.